Well, I think we've seen very clearly, especially over the last year or so, this surge in interest in parents' rights and in transparency to have a sense of what actually is happening in our schools. And during COVID, obviously parents got a very clear look into a lot of what our schools were doing. You know, Zoom education as these kids were learning remotely, and parents are able to walk by, listen, and kind of see a little bit more of what was going on in the kids' classroom experience. And a lot of parents had concerns about what they saw. And so between school officials or teachers, in a lot of cases, pushing content that is questionable, controversial, maybe not appropriate, it's not academically rigorous. And so parents, I think, kind of started to raise their hand and raise some questions. And unfortunately, we've seen from the left, we've seen from the media who say there's nothing to see here, right? And so the CRT, the critical race theory debate, for instance, we heard for months that this is just something that's made up by the right. Critical race theory is only taught in law school. Anybody who's claiming otherwise is simply lying. And then we see folks like the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the country, come out and explicitly call for curriculum being informed by CRT at the K-12 level, right? So we essentially saw months and months of gaslighting of parents and of advocates of students saying, you guys are just making up this idea that there's a concern about politics. And then on the flip side, we're seeing many of these same establishment organizations actively pushing for this content. And so parents, I think, have said, look, we are partners in education, right? These are our children. We have a right to know what is being taught in the classroom. And so academic transparency, which is a legislative policy that we at Goldwater helped pioneer to say, look, let's just be very clear, there's no reason that our state-operated government schools should be teaching content in a black box. The materials that our kids are learning in our public schools is information that a parent should easily be able to know what is that content, what's being taught. And so academic transparency basically says, very simply, let's have our public schools post online a list of the actual instructional materials that are being used, a sort of syllabus or a bibliography, so that a parent can go online, maybe after work, and see, here are the resources that my student did encounter, is going to encounter, have those conversations with the student and engage, and also critically to be able to see that content when they're making a decision about where to enroll their student. It shouldn't ever get to a point where a parent rolls the dice on a school because they don't know what's taught in the classroom, and suddenly their student comes home with a bunch of material that's not academically meaningful but is more politically ideological. So something like academic transparency empowers the parent and says, we're putting you back in the driver's seat to help control and steer and navigate the education of your kid, and to identify a schooling environment that's going to actually promote academic rigor and not a political agenda.